son. My my 3-year-old is just getting ready to go to the park for with his mom right now. So that'll potentially keep him from Zoom bombing us here. We'll see though. You never
There you
know.
go. It's anything goes right now. Well, cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, welcome everybody. Jim Benton, CEO of Chorus. Welcome to the weekly briefing where we look at the insights behind the conversations. And today I'm with Pete Kazanjy. Pete, how you doing today?
Hanging in there, man. Hanging in there. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Great to have a veteran here as well. You've been doing this for a while, and I love your product, your sales, and your founding experience kind of all mixed together. Yeah, any unique surprises, good or bad, right now?
A lot of surprises. I think we're seeing a lot of people contending with the big move to work from home. Obviously, I think that's kind of just like been quite an adjustment for a lot of organizations, whether you're talking about field reps or you're talking about like inside teams that were used to being very tightly coupled with SDRs and SDR AEs, and now everybody's kind of like separate. But yeah, a lot of ups, a lot of downs. But people are being really resilient, and the important thing is that we all share information together to help advance the entire practice.
Yeah, we've been looking at meeting volume, so recorded across the Chorus platform, and when we look at just even our most recent data, summer's been a little bit soft, but overall, we're only down 5% from the Q2 average. I know that you're deep in the analytics at Atrium. How do you think about this, and is this consistent with what you're seeing out in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw was that like you can kind of see it a little bit there in the March 30th, April 6th kind of area where there was like a little bit of a dip there. But I think there was like a momentary kind of dip of people saying like, okay, what's going on? Prospects were canceling, et cetera. We kind of saw a similar thing across Atrium's customer base. So Atrium makes sales performance analysis software, and we saw something similar, and also on my own sales team. But then it's kind of like it's bumped back up again, and then it's not surprising that you see some down there at the end because like guess what, summer.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, there's two areas we want to talk about today. One was going a little bit deeper on the various aspects of the sales org and how they're engaging. And then the second part is just looking at the executives and the C-suite and how they're getting pulled into the sales process. So we'll kick off looking at the sales org, AEs, SDRs, et cetera, CSMs. And one of the first stats that I wanted to get your perspective on is the days are changing. They're starting earlier, and these are customer-facing meetings. And they're definitely seeing a lot of meetings going after 4 p.m. on the most recent data. What's your take on this?
I mean, this makes a ton of sense. We've seen this with our own AE team, insofar as you lose an hour of commute at the beginning of the day, an hour of commute at the end of the day, and a lot. I think what ends up happening is a lot of that gets filled back up with customer-facing meetings. It was funny. Just before this, I'm in San Francisco, so it's 8:30 or whatever. I was on a call with New York at 7 a.m. just riding along with one of my account executives. And the reason why you can do that is because you can spread your day out. So, but definitely makes sense that's happening for sure.
How do we keep our teams mentally healthy and motivated, knowing that they're being pulled? Even yourself, we're all being pulled into a different type of day. Are you finding it putting strains on sort of the mental health of our sales teams?
Definitely. And I think that, how sellers are activity based. They measure themselves. If they're doing a good job, they're measuring themselves with respect to these kind of precursor metrics. And so I think that the thing you have to be careful of, just kind of like any athlete, you have to make sure that they don't go too hard and blow out their Achilles or what have you. And so I think it's important, like more is better up to a certain point. At a certain point, you get saturation, and then you'll start seeing that in kind of like the degradation of other quality metrics. For instance, you'll see, pipeline management KPIs like untouched opportunities or the time between touches on ops and what have you starting to deteriorate, just largely because AEs are potentially heaping more onto their plate than they can adequately consume. And then you'll also see it from a personal engagement standpoint. I saw this with actually one of my reps, and of course, like salespeople are generally speaking pretty voluble, extroverted people, so they want to be interacting with their peers. They're not right now, and so if you combine, overloading with respect to customer facing meeting volume, plus that you can potentially start seeing degradation in terms of like email volume, like the number of accounts that people are interacting with, largely because people are just getting burned out. So a good way to handle that is just like have a soft cap, right? Just like instrument that, have a soft cap. Like we don't want to see people having more than 20 customer facing meetings a week, or we don't want to have you quote unquote managing more than 50 ops in your pipe or whatever, obviously contingent on ASP. And then pay attention to those other KPIs to make sure that like folks aren't like overloading themselves, and just make sure you're not skipping one-on-ones and front and center those conversations.
Yeah, the human connection. I'm curious about even just the keeping it fun, but anything that you've done or heard others do that are just keeping the human connection really high internally.
Yeah, we probably did a bad job of this originally. And I got some good feedback from my reps to say like, hey, there's a lot of things that happen just organically in the office. Somebody gets off a call, sounded good, other people heard it, high fives all around, et cetera, et cetera. You just kind of like miss those things. And so you have to be intentional about like refilling those. I think having a good rigorous operating cadence helps with that. So we have 9 a.m. stand-ups, just as standing Zoom call. It's 15 minutes. 15 minutes. What was your big achievement yesterday? What's your big goal for today?
Yep.
An opportunity to get more kind of like FaceTime with folks. And then also doing stuff like we've been doing. I do quarterly dinners one-on-one with my reps. So you can actually do that virtually. Just they get Uber Eats, you get Uber Eats. You have dinner together over Zoom. It's a little weird, but like not really. And then we actually just did a team dinner, the same thing with like 8 people. And it worked fine, right? It's like, it's not the same as taking a group of people to like the House of Prime River or whatever, but like, at least it's, it's not nothing, right? So just, be intentional about refilling those things that have kind of disappeared.
I love the intentionality there. I think it's critical. We're testing different, things in the all hands and more breakouts and small groups and just getting people talking.
Sure.
When we look at the data behind different aspects of the sales side, we are finding that on closed lost deals, especially as we look at this data compared to last year, we're spending more time on the deals that lost. And we're looking at similar data on the deals that we've won, where we're also spending more meetings are going into both of these. What's your advice for teams out there, as we're thinking about how we get these deals over the line and kind of support this pipeline right now?
Yeah, this isn't surprising to me insofar as I think it's kind of feels less of a knock-on from a virtualized environment and more of a knock-on from like a distressed economic environment, where by virtue of the fact that you have like higher scrutiny on purchases, it's just it's taking more meetings in order to get things closed. But then of course, like as long as win rates are staying the same, you would also have you would have more meetings per closed loss as well. Just kind of is what it is. When you have a kind of a distressed economic environment, there's going to be more scrutiny. You're going to have to have that incremental meeting with that incremental stakeholder or like overseer or what have you. I think probably the thing to just be mindful of here is obviously the old truism is like obviously the best answer the salesperson can get is a yes, and the second best answer is a quick no. Yep. And so just being mindful of like, are we spending, to quote one of my former reps, Brad Snyder, who's over at Redis Labs now, are we spending good time with good ops? Or are we really kind of like, are we throwing good money after bad, or throwing, good time after bad? Just being intellectually honest about it.
Yeah. How do you, in your opinion, look, we're having to work harder on ops right now, and between the economic environment and other factors, how do we make sure we're not over-investing in ops that are potentially in segments that aren't investing right now?
Yeah, I think that's tough. I think, one of the things that I think just early on in April and May, I think a lot of organizations saw a lot of pipeline vaporization happening, where you're kind of like bumping along and a bunch of like ops like left the pipe. So you ended up with reps like really pressing. We're like, okay, well, these are the only ops that I have left right now. I'm going to refill my pipe, so I'm just gonna, I'm gonna try to make do with what I got. And I think now that things like the pipeline that reps have right now has the current economic reality baked into it, whereas the pipeline they had going into March or April had previous economic realities, pardon me, like in it. And so I think rebasing their expectations, say, great, what is, like, refresh ourselves. What is our ICP?
Yep.
Like, what are, like, let's refresh and retrench our qualification criteria and make sure that this organization is a good fit and is looking to buy right now, because it's not April anymore, it's not May anymore. We can't, it's not useful for us to chase anything with a heartbeat.
Interesting. So it's almost like we've gone through, and I'm seeing this on our side, where we refreshed the pipeline, where the opportunities there today are the ones that match the industries that are investing, that might be seeing
Yep.
some tailwind. We're made the tough calls on the ones that are punting and not making decisions right now. And it's back to running really well-run pipeline management processes.
For sure.
When we look at the different roles, we look at SDRs. Overall cold calling dials have been down, though, in Q2. We're up 1% versus Q2 when we look at Q3 versus Q2. AE meeting volume down 5% versus Q2, and then the CSM meeting volume, which is higher than AEs, is down 3% versus Q2. What's your advice for SDRs? Maybe to start with that group, what do you do on the SDR front right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the the challenge here, my hypothesis here is that this is a management issue, where it turns out that cold calling is probably the least favorite thing for a lot of SDRs to do. Depending on your organization or kind of your sales motion, it can be really effective. But if all of a sudden you send a bunch of people home to work from home and you have less visibility and your instrumentation isn't great,
Yep.
it's not going to be surprising that people are going to stop doing the thing that's unpleasant and they don't like to do. And so I think that my advice there would be just use this as an opportunity to refresh your instrumentation rigor there. I can imagine it could be another component too, where you can't call into a phone tree and then get to somebody's desk line, but that's kind of been happening for like the last 5 years, 10 years anyway, as everybody goes to cell phone, and there's a bunch of really good cell phone data providers out there. So that feels right there like just like a management deficit.
Yeah, the connect rates haven't dropped much. I mean, we're 9.5% versus 10.5 to 11. So you're right. If we pick up the phone,
call more.
Yeah, it pretty much does say that. Now it's trickier when you're at home and there's other factors. We're finding just a huge reliance on email. Is what's happening there. But if you look at the AEs are down 5%. We're seeing some of the summer softness there, but not significant. Overall, they've made this adjustment. They're in the motion right now. Might be a little bit of fatigue in here, so I'm curious, your thoughts on that front. But are you finding AEs on your team and as the groups you work with maintaining, in it, doing it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, you can kind of see that mid-March bump where a bunch of like lockdowns started happening, and people. I think essentially what happened there is a bunch of like meetings vaporized from the calendar at the same time the pipeline vaporized. But otherwise, people are pretty steady state. I've actually found my AEs doing more meetings, but that might be just because we have a pretty good inbound funnel.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think that when we drill into the data, there's companies that are up 30% or down 30%, and it depends on the segments and categories. There actually isn't as many that are just flatlined. I think
I buy that.
The CS teams are up. So definitely a heavier reliance on the CS motion on retention and renewals. Down a little bit since Q2, but I think that's really maybe the hero act of what we're seeing right now. Are you finding that yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the motion that people are doing as pipeline vaporizes and new business win rates deteriorate and deal cycles expand, obviously you want to bear hug your existing customers and make sure that people are fully embedded, and if organizations are going to be chopping if they're going to be chopping spend and chopping marginal vendors, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that line.
Are you able to get these groups to collaborate right now? These three teams that might have been sitting next to each other and now remote. Are you finding any friction or challenges with them connecting?
I think to start maybe a little bit, but one of the things that I really try to habituate in my organization is people doing a really good job of Slack calls.
Yeah.
Like not Slack typing, because a staccato like quasi-asynchronous chat session is dramatically lower fidelity than just, I'm just going to call you.
Yeah.
right? And this is one of the things that's really nice about Slack is you can like type something, be like, hey, you free right now? Look at their calendar, and then just call them,
That's
right?
my favorite playbook too, by the way, the Slack call button, just for the informal, don't even turn video on, just quick chat.
Hey, what's up? How's it going? You have to habituate people to it because they're afraid, like, oh, I'm interrupting you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, just habituating the team to do that kind of took a couple months, but now I'm pretty good at it.
Let's talk selling to the C-suite, just the exec involvement that we're seeing across the board. And I'd love to get your perspective on this. On the buying side, 108% increase since January. Executives are this light blue, directors the dark blue, but it's up. We're seeing a lot more involvement on the execs being into the deals that we're trying to sell into. And then
Yep.
across our platform. And on the selling side, vendors essentially are up 65%. So not up as much.
Yep.
But up and being pulled into these deals more than ever. Is this consistent? I know you were on a call this morning right before we jumped on.
Yeah, that was a sell side call, and that was just me in my functionality as the sales manager because I have a bunch of AEs that are ramping right now, so I'm riding along with them, being the solutions consultant. But yeah, I mean, this makes a ton of sense insofar as this feels to me like a reflection of economically distressed times. In an economically uneven time, you're going to have more scrutiny on purchasing. As a result, you're going to have. I think we kind of saw that earlier with like you're going to see incremental meetings. It takes 4 meetings instead of 3. It takes 5 meetings instead of 4, et cetera. And then like probably at those tail end, those meeting 4, meeting 5, meeting 6, what have you, is going to be with a more executive audience. Just who have a higher level of scrutiny, want to make sure that the people who are sponsoring a transaction have done their level of diligence there. So this makes a ton of sense. And then you would see it on the sell side too, because of course,
Yeah.
if someone's bringing their CFO or the CEO to the party, they're going to want to see some gray hair on the other side of the table.
There's the CFO, 92% increase, still maintaining, significant strength showing up in the calls. So what do we do differently? How do we train the teams, knowing that we're going to see not just the economic buyer, but the CFOs and, senior leadership joining the calls? Are we doing things differently on these interactions?
Yeah, I think that the thing that we've done there, so again, I'll speak to it from the standpoint of Atrium. So Atrium makes sales performance analysis software. It's like, reporting and dashboarding, and that has anomaly detection, kind of like automates the analysis, a lot of this stuff. Great. Primary stakeholders on that are going to be sales managers and sales operations people. Wonderful. One of the things that we've found is that if you can get, like, if your product has a value proposition, even if it's an ancillary value proposition, secondary value proposition that is like CXO, CFO facing, in our case, providing the CFO with like a helpful dashboard that like scratches his or her particular itch, even if it's an ancillary use case and it's not like core to the ROI of the business, sometimes that executive, like the executive like itch to be scratched, even if it isn't core to like the business case to the transaction,
Yeah.
can really be helpful because like, oh, well, the CFO holds the purse strings and it may not be the most rational thing in the world, but like, guess what? We're all human. So I think that's probably a pretty big thing there, is to think about if you can do something that actually would make the CEO, CFO, CXO's life easier, do that. I don't think every product necessarily has that capacity, but if you can, figure it out.
Do you find a bigger push even yourself on putting deeper ROI, more extreme ROI type emphasis inside these presentations?
I think one of the things that we've done, yes, for sure, we've done this historically insofar as, so the way that Atrium sells is, we sell on customer data, right? It takes 5 minutes to just turn on Atrium, it's auto configured, et cetera. So like usually what we're doing is we're working with a sales manager, a set of sales managers, a sales operations person. And what's happening is like in the sales process, like a week or two, a bunch of insights are being detected, and like things are being remediated. Oh, this SDR is behaving in this way. That's not good. Let's coach them to fix it. Oh, look at that remediation. And then documenting that. So the way that we do that is we have a Google slide template where you can just like essentially, we call it the trapper keeper. Kind of tells you how old I am. Or like we call it the sales team highlight reel. Internally, we call it the 3-ring binder, the trapper keeper. So you just, document that stuff up, and then now your champion has this nice little thing, that book report that they can take to the CFO. They can take to the CEO and be like, look, look at what has been happening already. So just enabling your champion to have like an asset that they can use to sell internally, because
Yep.
they're not gonna do the work. I mean, they got their day job, right? So they're not necessarily going to collateralize that themselves. So the more that you can do that for them, the better off you are.
It seems like one of the other areas, knowing that more execs and CFOs are on calls, is we are seeing on the sales side 29% increase in CEOs,
Yep.
being pulled in and joining. And if you look at January, February, it's up significantly. We were talking earlier about this in May. I think pipeline was challenged. Q2 was a tough quarter for a lot of companies.
Yep.
Have you found this? Are you seeing this across your customer base? Just the CEO involvement in, kind of getting on the front lines significantly up?
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends on the stage of the organization, but if you're, Chorus size or Atrium size or what have you, obviously, it's kind of all hands on deck, and we're trying to get things across the line. And if you've got more executive involvement on the buy side, usually prospects are going to want to see that match with executive involvement on the sell side as well. Even if it's just to kind of like show up, smile, nod, you're like
That's right.
express how excited you are about the partnership, etc. You still have to kind of show face.
That's right. I mean, that's what the data shows. SMB CEOs are spending a ton of time on 50K plus deals, significantly more than the upmarket CEOs. Lastly, Pete, I
Yes.
know that you've documented so much of this knowledge over the years. You've got it on foundingsales.com. Can people find this data? How would they get some of these insights that you've had?
Yeah, so you and I were talking about this earlier. My background is actually not in sales. I was in product marketing and product management way back in the day at at VMware, and then at my last software company, TalentBin, was a recruiting software company where I had to go from business generalist founder to seller, sales manager, sales leader, and then we were acquired by Monster.
Yeah.
Managing new product sales for a 1,000+ person sales organization. So at the time, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of like documentation on it. Obviously, there was Aaron Ross's predictable revenue, which is fantastic. But for like kind of the stage before that, where you're figuring out the, initial, like the initial 0 through 50 customers, there really wasn't a lot of documentation. And so that's what Founding Sales is. So the entire text of the book is available online at foundingsales.com. It's largely just like there as a textbook resource for like the startup community.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. I mean, I love the insights and I like the chapter breakdown. You hit all the right buckets. Pete, I appreciate you joining us. For those listening, you can get access to the content we're sharing here at Chorus.ai. And Pete, just so great to have you here. Such awesome to share your insights, and congrats on everything.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks to your data team for throwing together all that insights. It was really kind of fascinating to see in data what is gut that we feel is going on from a gut standpoint.
It's nice to validate it. So that's the objective here. Well, hey, have a great rest of the Thursday. Catch you soon.
Okay, bye, Jim. Thank you.
Cheers.